I will kick everything off. Folks, welcome to our 6th session on the 3rd and final day of EL Impact 2020, a virtual conference by Ellevation. We are so grateful to have you with us today for this session, Ellevation's Impact on EL Program Management, a panel discussion. We have the opportunity to bring you educators from 5 of our partner districts to share more about their experiences navigating the current environment this year, how they've adjusted some of their instructional plans to meet students' needs this year and into the future, with an additional focus on some of the ways that they're using Ellevation to assist them in those objectives. So we hope this session will be a good opportunity to continue to learn from your peers and collaborate around what some of those challenges are. And if you are rather a partner with Ellevation or just interested in learning more about what we do, hopefully this will provide that opportunity for that type of learning as well today. Few bits of housekeeping before we kick off the session. I had mentioned just previously before some folks arrived, but you all have your video and audio off by default if you're an attendee. So rest assured that if you're concerned about any noise, that's already off on your end. In addition to that, we encourage you to engage throughout the session with 2 various options to do that. We have our general chat feature, which you can use to just provide real-time reactions and thoughts as the session goes on. If you have a specific question that you want to direct to any of our speakers or just broadly to our panel today, please use the Q&A feature to flag that question. We have members of the Ellevation team here who will be help moderating the chat and flagging those questions to our attendees later as well. Lastly, I just wanted to give a quick plug for Ellevation's social media. If you're not already following us, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram using @ElevationEd, that's @ELLEVATIONED, to follow along with our work and continue to interact with our educator community here. I'm your host for the session today, Ben McNelly, along with my co-host Maya for the entirety of EL Impact. But I'm actually going to kick it over to one of my wonderful colleagues, Alex Mukherjee, who will be our session moderator today, and who will be facilitating this wonderful discussion with our 5 educator partners. So with that, I'll kick it over to Alex to introduce the panel, and I hope everybody enjoys the session and enjoys your learning today. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ben. Hey, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alex Mukherjee. I'm an account manager at Ellevation. I'm going to just go through the names of the panelists one by one, and then when I say your name, just feel free to do a quick intro, who you are, what your role is at your district, where you're located, and maybe how big your EL population is there. And of course, in advance, I just want to give another thanks to the panelists for joining us today and giving us their time and energy for this session. So we can start with Nancy out in Washington.
Hi, I'm Nancy Smith, and I am in Marysville, Washington, Marysville School District. We're about an hour north of Seattle, and I'm the director of ELL Migrant, Title III, Title VI, and the HiCap programs for our school district. And we have about 1,300 EL students right now, and 280 monitored at our current count.
Thanks, Nancy. Alice, do you want to go next?
Yes, good morning and welcome everyone. I am Alice Solis. I'm the Director of EL's Assessment and Special Programs with Turlock Unified School District. And I have been using Ellevation for 8 years. Turlock Unified School District is located in the heart of the Central Valley in Turlock, California. Our student enrollment is 13,747 students, of which 3,350 students are identified as English learners. That's about 24%. We have a total of 36 languages spoken in our district, and we have 728 certificated staff members.
Awesome. Yolanda, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm Yolanda Rios. I'm the Director of Multilingual Title III and Migrant Services for New Caney ISD, which is about 30 minutes away from Houston, so Houston, Texas area. Our entire district's about 17,000 students, 5,000 of those are ELs and 900 monitors. And as far as my district team, we have 2 specialists and we have EL coaches on every campus. We have about 14 years doing a 2-way dual language program. And we also run that program from pre-K through 8th grade. And we also have our newcomer programs for middle school and high school.
We're going to move over to Virginia now. Curt, would you want to start introduction there?
Actually, I'd rather defer that to my supervisor, Megan Moore, who's also on.
Yeah, let's do that.
Well, after she does.
Oh, thank you, Curt.
You're welcome.
My name's Megan Moore. I'm the Director of Federal Programs in Manassas City Schools. We're about 30 miles outside of Washington, D.C., but probably about 2 hours in bad traffic from Washington, D.C. We have a small division. We're a 10-mile radius. We have 9 schools. And our total ESOL population is about 32% of the total student population in Manassas City Schools. And Curt, I'll let you share some more statistics about Manassas.
Sure. So as Megan said, we serve directly about 32% of our population. On top of that, we have our monitor students where we monitor directly for the first 2 years of monitor, but we go all the way up to monitor 6Y4. And then on top of that, we have our students who are fully English proficient. When you look at all the data, our primary home language other than English kids are probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 65% of our overall population. We have the highest concentration by percentage in the Commonwealth or the state of Virginia.
Awesome. Next, we'll go down to Maryland. Katherine, do you want to kick us off there?
Sure. Hi, my name is Kathy Gull, and I'm the English Learner Coordinator for Frederick County Public Schools. So Manassas is about 30 miles away from DC. Well, we are too, but the opposite direction. And we are a large district. We have about 44,000 students in our district, of which about 3,000 to 4,000 are English learners. Our population has grown exponentially in the last 8 years, I'd say by over 400%. So we've got a good team at central office. We have about 12 staff total between an international office where we do enrollments, and we have teacher specialists, and we have a program therapist. So we've got quite a few staff members that support our students in our program.
And then lastly, Dr. Moore, you can finish up the intros for us.
Hey, thanks. So I'm one of Kathy's colleagues in Frederick County, Maryland. Kathy mentioned our phenomenal central office teams. We also have over 100 EL teachers actively serving those 3,000 to 4,000 EL students in our schools. So we're excited to be here today as part of this panel.
Great. I'm going to jump us into our first question, so we can kind of just whip around. Feel free to chime in when you'd like. First question is, everyone's interested in hearing a little more about why you initially decided to partner with Ellevation. So were there specific features or supports we offer, whether it's program management or instruction-based things that were especially appealing to you, and how did that partnership kind of begin and what's happened since then?
Frederick County can jump in here. There are really two sides to the EL program that we work with, and we have that kind of compliance program management side, and then we have the instructional side. And obviously we say students are the most important thing, the most important people in our district, and instruction is the most important thing that we do. But we know that there's compliance. Well, we have a very transient population. And so we have students that move from school to school, and paper-based is really difficult to make sure that we stay on top of everything, and that we track everything, and that we progress monitor. So from a program management perspective, it was really important for us to be able to effectively and efficiently take kind of that administrative managerial type of work off of the plates of our EL teachers so that they could really focus on instruction. So from my perspective as a program manager, it's so important to be able to lift the burden of tracking papers and doing the forms and doing all that, and having that housed in a safe place that as students move around, we could access easily. And so I really wanted to speak to the compliance piece of that with Title III and kind of the federal grants and that type of thing. But the instructional side of the house, I'm really going to kick over to Kaitlin, to Dr. Moore, because she is our achievement specialist and does a phenomenal job with managing the instructional programming.
Yeah, so as Kathy mentioned, we collaborate a lot on both sides of that house, but we rely quite a bit on Ellevation for our teachers and that instructional progress monitoring portion of the work. So we use Ellevation to help teachers communicate things like those can-do descriptors to help set high expectations for our English learners, as well as really capture not only the instructional data, right? So things like we use the access test and we can progress monitor student achievement over time, looking at the specific domains and their overall levels. But we also rely on things like the notes feature in Ellevation to capture some of that anecdotal data. Kathy mentioned the transient nature of our EL population. And so that's been a really powerful piece, getting that kind of mixed methods data on our students. We have Ellevation that shows us the numbers and that empirical data, but those notes, that qualitative piece, also follow our students school to school, and it really lets our teachers collaborate and give us the picture of the whole child as we monitor progress.
So as our office gets questions from principals at different schools, the first thing we do is log into Ellevation so we can really dig into that student's individual information so that we can offer support for that individual child.
This is Alice. Along those same lines, we decided to partner with Ellevation because of the EL program management. Like Katherine had said, we too were having several lists and cross-referencing every list to identify ELs. In our first year with Ellevation as a district, we went from 40% of collecting teacher recommendation forms to 100% compliant. Also, Ellevation has allowed us to reclassify students more accurately, including our ELs with IEPs.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why, Megan and I mean, the two of us really run our department, and we oversee, for our division, since we're small, we have a caseload management system. So all of our students, once they're identified, and then once they're screened, they're on someone's caseload so that we can identify who those students are very quickly. What Ellevation allows us to do is, instead of everything being separate Excel documents and multiple, as other individuals has indicated, multiple paperwork, we're able to put all of that together into one platform, which allows us, at our fingertips to be able to get data on any child that's within our system, to help us have our checks and balances in place to make sure that we're cross-referencing with the paperwork at individual buildings with what we see in our office. It just streamlines the process tremendously. What would have taken me and my supervisor, Megan, to do in sometimes 2 or 3 days, we can get done in just about an hour, because it makes the processes that we have in place that much faster. The other real benefit for us is, since we have such an incredibly high percentage of our students, every teacher in our division has L's in their classroom, okay? There's not one classroom in our division that does not have an L in the classroom. And because of that, we run a tremendous amount of professional development for our teachers in order to be able to help them to lower the language barriers of the content in which, they're instructing and serving our students. This can't, for us, it cannot just be the ESOL teacher responsible for that. Okay, it has to be everybody responsible for that. Ellevation allows us, especially with the strategies and instructional practices and activities, it allows us to reach out, throw a wider net for our teachers. It's a great tool that lets them to very easily go through a library of different strategies and activities that they can very easily incorporate into their lesson planning and their conversations and discussions on, how they want their students to engage in language while they're learning content. So, the benefits of Ellevation for us it's our second year of using Ellevation, and we're still discovering incredibly great benefits. Everything from the identification of our Ls, the assessment data of our Ls, the placing appropriately of our Ls, the instructional programming and alternative instructional programming of our Ls, and the ongoing progress monitoring, not only of our Ls, but also of our program for our program evaluation. So it helps to streamline everything we do. And incredibly beneficial.
And I'd like to add to that the fact that Ellevation is kind of a one-stop shop for us and for our principals, and the fact that everything you could possibly need is at your fingertips there, from the state standardized assessments to access data to iReady to our PALS phonological awareness assessment. We've had principals tell us, boy, I wish Ellevation allowed all the gen ed kids in as well too. This is wonderful.
Yeah, and another real benefit for us as well is for, because L's are not a monolithic group of kids, right? So you have, different groups within the group. And so looking specifically at our long-term L's with assessment data history that we have in there, so we can more meaningfully communicate and talk about the needs of our students who are at a level 3 and they just seem to be kind of not making the kind of progress that we would like to see them make, and what could potentially be some root causes to that. So Ellevation is another really incredible tool to help us with those discussions as well as our child study process, as well as our pre-referral process.
So we started our journey with Ellevation about 3 years ago. And just a shout out to Herva. We love Herva here in New Caney ISD. And we had, one of the big steps that I had was I really wanted to bring in the 7 steps with John Seidlitz. And when I saw this product, it really aligned with where we were headed. I walked into this district who had a very well-established dual language program, pre-K through 8th grade, 14 years already with a very good established program. It makes up for 50% of the elementary population. But what we were seeing is that we were really needing additional support for our secondary teachers. And that's really where the gap came from. And I knew that we needed to do some work there, definitely, just based on our accountability and based on our results-driven accountability report. We saw that there was definitely gaps. So we were losing these ELs, and they were doing great in elementary, and then they were kind of dropping in secondary. So we got instructional strategies. We piloted at Woodridge Forest Middle School with an incredible leadership team. And we were able to see double-digit gains in 1 year. Also, with that being said, in 1 year, we did see, we had 725 kids exit EL services. The year prior, we had 65. So we had incredible results with 1 year of using the product and 1 year of implementation. So now, year 3, we have scaled it to pre-K through high school. So everybody has Ellevation instructional strategies. And we just brought in the compliance component this year we're piloting it at 4 elementaries, and we're planning to scale it all the way to all the grade levels next school year. So we've kind of taken smaller bites and kind of started the opposite way, but we've seen just great results with Ellevation.
I just also wanted to add, I think Curt had said about, all teachers have ELs in their classroom. And so where we're at in Turlock is we're continuing as a reminder to increase teachers' awareness of who their ELs are in their classroom. So they log into Ellevation, they get a quick view of who their ELs are. They've got their dashboard view. They've got their student profile with the data, as opposed to, well, where's that list? Is the office going to give it to me? Who are my ELs? And they've got it at their fingertips.
Yeah, the instructional strategies really does kind of provide that inroad into the mainstream classroom. So that, when a mainstream teacher does have an EL student, you can kind of get into that professional learning environment through that instructional strategies feature. And really and then they're like, well, wait a minute, this would work for all of my students. And we're like, yes, it's excellent pedagogy. So yeah, I would agree with that. The instructional strategies really is an excellent feature.
And, just to piggyback off of something that you just said, Ms. Gull, is that, one of the things that we struggled with several years ago was our administrators not necessarily knowing what to look for. And so, as a division, we spent a lot of time with administrative look-fors based on, professional standards of the Commonwealth of Virginia, as well as what to look for, good English language development instruction. Ellevation also streamlines that, because now all of our administrators who have accounts to Ellevation and who attend trainings with Megan and I, they know, they have a much clearer picture of what that looks for. One of the great things about the activities and strategies is that you can go on, you can see a video of it in action, a 3-minute video, sometimes a 5-minute video. But what that does for an administrator, if I go on there and I look at that, and then I go into a classroom, I'm not going to be comparing what's happening in that classroom, but it gives me a frame of reference of what it could look like. And it also gives me a frame of reference of what kind of language objective should I be looking at when it's combined with the content. And it also gives me a frame of reference of that all of the ELs in this classroom could be participating. So in that regard, it's an incredible, useful tool for our administrators as well.
And speaking of classrooms, this would be a good time, I think, to transition into our next question. How have the challenges, or kind of what have the challenges been specifically in terms of moving out of classrooms into remote learning, hybrid learning? And then in addition to that, if there have been any positives and opportunities for growth, things you've learned that you can kind of take into EL program management and instruction moving forward, I would love to get a sense from the group what folks think about
share
that.
a little bit about what New Caney ISD is doing, what the proud work that we're doing. We have been a one-to-one district for over a decade. The high schools had actually transitioned to that movement quite further than that. And so we use Canvas as our learning management system. And one of the things that we really decided as a district leadership team was that whatever we were going to provide for kids at home was going to be high quality. And in our case, being Spanish being the highest native language in both languages, to stay true to our dual language model. And so we have a district level writing team who is producing these lessons. So that way, that weight is not on our teachers of having to build high quality content for every core area. And it does follow our one day, 50-50 model. And so that has been such a great relief for our teachers to be able to have that. We still have a ton of challenges as well that have came with it in regards to a lot of our ELs are working in secondary, any challenges that they face, their family got unemployed and they're working. So our secondary ELs, I think, have had a harder hit as far as staying engaged in that remote learning environment. But overall, we are trying to make every effort communicating with families. Our teachers have been just incredible having to balance Zooms and face-to-face instruction. And so but we are just extremely proud that we're able to provide the supports as much as possible. We also have a weekly charla with all our teachers that's very heavily attended, and we've shared a lot of the asynchronous lessons that you guys have, the bundle packs. Those have been such a great help. We're so thankful for those. And so we try to highlight the strategy of the month and how would it look like remotely and how would it look like in the classroom to make sure that they're still seeing this product as something that they can use for their ELs, even if they're at home.
Some of our challenges have been, I think everyone has had them as well, technology for students and staff, devices, apps, connectivity, training for teachers to teach remotely and not overwhelming them, time for teachers to plan and collaborate, student engagement and participation. How can we ensure students are logging on every day? Safety, how are we going to connect with students in this new environment? Also, how do we address learning loss and grading? Some of our learnings have been, it took our district, we're a district of about 14,000, to kind of roll out and distribute student Chromebooks grades 7 through 12, a little over 5 years. When COVID hit and school closure, we distributed so grade 7 through 12, 7,000 students. But when COVID hit and school closures, we distributed preschool to grade 6 student Chromebooks in 1 week. I also want to give a big shout out, and Ellevation has helped us achieve this, is we're still moving forward with EL compliance. We're adhering to public health guidelines. We recently administered the initial LPAC to 350 students, the optional summative to 125. October is our reclassification month in our school district, and we reclassified 107 students. I'd also just like to highlight that we're finding ways, like I'm sure you are, to do the essential work. And one of the ways we've been doing the essential work is we have a planning committee, 2021 planning committee, reopening committee. But from that, we also have subcommittees, and I lead and facilitate our EL subcommittee to ensure that they're represented. And I think, like others, ensuring that that social emotional piece is happening every day, whether it's activities and or connecting with students. And I think in all this, a blessing is we are increasing our communication with parents, I think is a benefit and a plus for us.
Yeah, if I could just piggyback on something Alice mentioned, we talked a lot about the challenges that our students are facing in this virtual learning environment. In Frederick County, we've been fully virtual since March. We also learned very quickly what a challenge it is for our teachers. Mm-hmm. And so using Ellevation kind of from our central office level to lighten the cognitive load and the workload on our teachers as they adapted quickly was very important. So we used Ellevation at the end of last year to do a lot of reporting, end of year procedures, documentation for Title III compliance purposes, as well as this fall so far to help teachers get set up for the school year, do our screening assessments for EL students that had enrolled virtually during that period of school closure. So it has not only helped us support the classroom side of things and the instructional side of things to get our students engaged and our teachers using these effective strategies, but it's also just really helped us support our school-based staff in getting some of those compliance and, like Alice said, that essential work done.
And speaking of that, oh, go ahead.
No,
Katherine.
I was just going to say, I don't want Dr. Moore to sell herself short, because she has done some amazing work with our teachers in terms of really honing in on that student data, because Ellevation allows us to see the teachers that are serving those students. And so just like in the classroom, we're seeing virtually, we're much more effective when we have small group instruction. Students are a little more comfortable turning on their cameras. They're a little more comfortable contributing. We're able to provide small group professional learning based on the student population that our teachers serve. And Dr. Moore has been able to really look at those small groups that those teachers serve and say, you know what? They have a lot of newcomers. Let's focus our professional learning on how to engage newcomers in a virtual environment. How do we do that? And so our district has worked together to really try to not only individualize instruction for students, but individualize the professional learning for teachers.
Yeah, I wanted to just quickly turn it over to Nancy from Marysville here. I know in my chats with her, she's talked a bunch about how, from a district office perspective, she's been able to trickle down things to schools and educators and her EL specialists and folks like that. I don't know if you want to expand on that, Nancy.
So we, as far as like struggles, there's been a lot of struggles. You guys have all mentioned the same struggles. A way we kind of took advantage of having a closure, which we still do, is utilizing the Ellevation Academy. Mm-hmm. So I created in Washington State, it's called Clock Hours. I don't know what it is in all the states for professional development. So what I did is I created like an 18 clock hour by picking certain Ellevation Academy just to get the sell. Because, you know, as all teachers are, they're super busy. But if you offer them something, then they were like, oh, I can get clock hours. And I had, I want to say over 200 teachers go ahead and go through the academies. So that's a bonus of having that online. I mean, our challenge is like all of yours as far as bandwidth and hotspots. We did focus on, we're completely virtual. We don't have hybrid yet, but we are bringing in our emerging and our newcomers. Because we can have 5 students to 1 adult in some, you know, very small group settings. And what has helped us a lot too, and I wanted to mention it before, I don't know if any of you are GLAD or AVID school districts, but we're AVID and GLAD. And what's great about Ellevation for the people, if you're on and that's your school district, The strategies tie directly to GLAD and AVID strategies. So your teachers don't feel like, oh, it's something else you're having us do. They're like, oh, it's right there at my fingertips, and it's not an additional. It just complements what we've already put forward. So I wanted to make sure I put that out there for anybody that's listening that is a little worried, like, strategies, is that one other thing? It's not really one other thing. It's just good practice. So.
Nancy,
And Nancy, great idea with the clocking the time with the academies. That was one feature that I just learned about recently as well. We also included the webinars and the recorded webinars. The webinars were during the time teachers were instructing remotely, but we included clock hours if they wanted to watch those recorded webinars. So those have been also outstanding and very helpful and supportive for our teachers as well.
And Nancy, you make a really great point with existing initiatives that are already in a division or a district. We here in Manassas City, we use the Learning Focused Schools lesson framework, as well as we're an AVID school district as well. And so one of the other attractions that pulled us towards Ellevation was the fact that it embeds, it supports, doesn't supplant anything, it supports those other initiatives that we have within the division. And because a lot of times we suffer the same, it's one more thing. And it's like, no, not really. It's, an addition to that can really help you because it's very specific to ELLs, right? So it's helpful for our teachers to know that a lot of these strategies, they could just plug right into the existing LFS template or the LFS framework that we use. And they're additional to whatever other strategies that you have. It's just that the mindset is very specific to helping to develop language. And that's been a real big plus for us too. And another thing I'd just like to add, the Ellevation, if those of you who are on and you're not familiar with Ellevation, I'm not paid by Ellevation at all. I think Ellevation is a really fantastic program. One of the great things about it are tools like the Ellevation Academy, where you can very quickly go in and you can learn anything you want to about the program and then apply it right away. The other thing that I'd like to add is the customer support that I've experienced. I have never asked a question, and believe me, I have never asked a question that has either irritated our Ellevation representatives or, been kind of like, oh, that's kind of a stupid question, Curt. I have always gotten incredible customer support. Any of my questions or problems that I've been having or issues have been answered within 24 hours. And also advice. The webinars that you mentioned have been a fantastic asset for us. Because what we do is we push them out to our administrators, we push them out to our leads in each one of our buildings, to our ESOL teachers, and also to our general education teachers. So, I mean, the services that it provides really do address that human resource component, as Kaitlin was talking about, and how our teachers are overloaded. And it helps them to be able to focus on the task at hand, what we need to do. And it also helps to take some of that pressure off.
Curt,
This would be a great time to go into.
Oh, sorry. I was just
go
going to
ahead.
one more thing because I think it's important. Thank you, Curt, for mentioning that, because I was going to say a lot of the things that we also wanted to bring into the product, which is our language development table and our Spanish development assessment. Those are things that are not, it's just a very local thing. All our representatives in our customer service have just been so good that they've helped build those things into the product. And you feel like all of you guys are very, very reachable. So we are very appreciative, but thank you, Curt, for mentioning that.
Yeah, we have experienced that as well. We have very specific monitoring forms that we have to use, and Ellevation has helped us to recreate them within their system. Instead of just saying, no, this is what we have, this is what you can use. Like you're saying, Yolanda, they've helped us to modify those things, and they've been willing to do that. And that's something that a lot of companies, I've worked with a lot of different companies, and this by far is the best customer service company that I've worked with.
And this would be a great time to go into our last question. Pretty much what Yolanda and Curt were just covering. How has Ellevation specifically supported you in addressing those hybrid learning or remote learning challenges? Any other parts of the platform or specific features that have been especially helpful?
We are a PLC district. A lot of what we do is with our teams and our campuses is not just planning, but we really look at that data piece. So dashboards have been a big thing. I know that a lot of y'all already mentioned dashboards, but we, try to take it to that next level and actually highlighting the kids and actually having live data that will actually move. So for example, we have what we call the newcomer English Proficiency Assessment Test, which is the NEPA. We created that locally. We're partnered up in addition to with another district who is doing it as well. Shout out to Pasadena ISD. And so we have worked collaboratively to develop that test, as well as now we've released the Spanish version of that, which is called the Spanish Development Assessment. So we can track students. It's kind of like a benchmark for TELPAS, Texas folks, TELPAS. And so that way we get to see how these kids are doing. And so we've, our Ellevation team has been so awesome that we get to upload that data. And so teachers are getting to see how those kids are moving throughout the year and seeing it on their dashboard as well. We have our language development table, which is something that goes home with all of our kids who are enrolled in a two-way dual language program. And they get that with their report card, and it kind of shows them how they're doing in English and how they're doing in Spanish, because that's so critical for us, because our goal of our program is really for our students to be bilingual, biliterate, and bicultural. And so it does not matter if your first language is English, we're also going to be looking at English for you. So we look at both ends. And so all of those tools that have been kind of developed locally have been now integrated into the product. And so it's just amazing to know that we can pick up the phone and it can happen. It happens like magic. So we're just very grateful for that. Instructional accommodations at the district level as a director, I love that I can pull up my dashboard and I can see who has assigned instructional accommodations. How many open LPACs do we have? We have 4 amazing compliance managers at the district level who manage all the compliance for all the schools. We have 17 schools. And so being able to see kind of where they're at in their workload, and it's just easier to conduct audits and all those good things. So
I wanted to mention, go back to the support of Ellevation. I want to note 2 things here. Our district, our task force, we considered Ellevation for a little over a year. That included demos, Q&As, referring us to other districts, talking to other districts, seeing what other districts were doing, and before we purchased. And it wasn't, that this goes to show that just their personalized customer service. So it wasn't Ellevation's plan for Turlock, it was Turlock's plan for Ellevation. And I just wanted to highlight that. And then if you aren't using these features in Ellevation, you got to use them. So I'm going to give a big shout out for creating views. It can be scary a little at first. I was there, but I feel like I'm a view kind of a quiz maker now, because we're saying, hey, can you run a view for this? Let's find these students. The other is it's so helpful as far as EL compliance with tracking the teacher recommendation forms and the RFEP monitoring forms. And like Yolanda said, creating those dashboard tiles. We created a district dashboard. All of our administrators have it. All of our teachers have it as well. And the last feature in regards to the instructional strategies, it just recently came out, and that's the usage tools. I know who's in the strategies. I know who's exploring. I know what they're looking at. And that's what we have strategized and highlighted our PD around. Hey, teachers are looking at hanging hashtags. I wonder, wow, once we introduced it in just a weekly update in our TUSD weekly news, we had 547 hits. It was almost like a game, but that usage tool can be very helpful. I also want to give just one last plug, and I think a few of you might have already said this, the help. When you submit a ticket, you hear back. You hear back with specifics. They'll walk you through, or they'll say, hey, it's fixed now. And so all those are plugs in how they've supported us to effectively implement and support what we need here to support our ELs in our district.
And I think I'm going to talk from the teacher's perspective and how delighted they have been in the accommodation forms that we have to fill out for our L students for state assessments, as well as our monitoring documents. They can all be done in Ellevation, and we can sign off on them in Ellevation using the signature feature. So we don't have to worry about coming into a building during COVID and passing 500 pieces of paper around for everyone to sign off on. They were incredibly pleased with our level 2 training that we had a couple of weeks ago on how to use the signatures, how to set meetings, and then sign forms together. The other piece that's been incredibly helpful is we have level 1 and 2 curriculum based on the Cengage materials for grades 5 through 12 in Manassas. And during summer curriculum writing, we matched every chapter with several different Ellevation activities. So now seeing the distance learning activities that can easily be incorporated into our level 1 and 2 curriculum while being taught via distance learning has just been amazing.
I'd like to make a comment. No, I'd like to make a comment just from a program management perspective. I think about the way that we get EL teachers. Sometimes they come with a master's degree program. Sometimes they come to us via praxis test. And so we have really tried to wrap around maybe the teachers that have come to us with less experience. And the way that we've done that is we've created an interactive document. It's an EL teacher workflow. And so within that document, they know it's based on the months of the year, it's based on the school calendar. They will know what they need to do. And within that document, let's say in September, we're talking about accommodation assignments, we're talking about notification of placement forms. So they can click in that document and it will either take them to one of the links in the Academy of Ellevation. It will take them to a document that kind of explains what they need to do. And so they go through that month by month because we're a Charlotte Danielson district. So we use the framework for teaching. Well, domain 4 is professional responsibilities. When you look at an EL teacher, their professional responsibilities are pretty significant. And so that document is completely integrated with Ellevation and the different tools that Ellevation provides that are necessary at the different parts of the year.
You know, one of the things that's also been incredibly helpful for me as an instructional specialist for the division is the fact that Ellevation has ahead of time worked behind the scenes with what they do to adapt their strategies and activities for the virtual environment and to provide templates and different suggestions on how these strategies and activities could be used. Because, you know, we run a lot of professional development, and some of the professional development we do is with general education teachers and getting them into Ellevation and helping them to learn as much as they possibly can about all things in the L universe, right? Having these already adapted, it does away with, well, that's great if you're in person, but how do we use it? Well, you can use it this way because Christina Estes or Ben or somebody else has already sent out a template for using, you know, in a Google slide, building strong sentences, or how you use triangle, circle, square. Or so when you really get down to the nuts and bolts of the instruction that's actually happening in the classrooms, whether it's in person or virtual, they're already way ahead of the curve by adapting a lot of their resources that they have to make it easier for you, the teacher, which I really appreciate.
All right, y'all. I'm going to move us into the Q&A section here, last section of today's panel. The first question, and I've seen a couple similar kind of questions throughout this session, PD for Ellevation. So specifically for strategies, I think this question is about, but more generally, if it's strategies, if it's just the platform, how you use the different compliance workflows in there. Could you all touch on how you facilitate successful PDs?
So our goal for professional learning for any teacher in our system, EL or a mainstream teacher, is to make it relevant, engaging, and applicable. And so we oftentimes point to Ellevation in those PD sessions to get to the applicable part and kind of help teachers take that next step in what this looks like in my classroom. So if we think about, we're a SIOP system, we use the SIOP framework and take a sheltered instruction approach. In a professional learning, of course, we're going to talk about that compelling why and equity and access and how sheltered instruction helps us get there. But you want your teachers to walk away with the what now. So oftentimes in our professional learning sessions with school teams or different content area teams, we will talk about kind of the theory and then use elevation strategies as the practice. So it can help us align it to specific standards. If you look at those strategy areas, we can dig deeply, which is really important right now in the virtual setting when we're prioritizing those key standards. You can search Common Core standards, you can search Next Gen Science standards, and point specifically to the elevation strategies that align with them. You can also focus in on, say, a language domain. Right now, many of you mentioned the issues we're seeing with engagement and participation of our English learners. Their affective filter is very high these days. And so we're seeing teachers struggle with getting kids to engage and talk and have that dialogue. So in those professional learning sessions, we point to that language domain in the elevation strategies. Let's look at those speaking and listening activities and find ways to lower the affective filter and bring back that student voice, even in the virtual setting. So we really do try and differentiate based on the need we're seeing in the school, but always continue to tie it to the theory, the sound pedagogical practices, and other initiatives like Kathy mentioned with the framework for teaching, so that it really does seem relevant to their practice, not just one more thing, and gives them something to walk away with that day.
I wanted to give an example of how the usage feature can be used. So we had shared in our weekly district newsletter was ELPAC now has the ELPAC Ellevation now has the ELPAC collections. And so that was something we shared as we are preparing for the administration of the Summit of ELPAC. And then I went back after sharing it the next day going, I wanted to see how many people just logged into some of those ELPAC collections. And it was like, you can see the chart go up because I did it by school. So you can see which schools from that usage feature, which collections and those activities that teacher had logged in after something was shared. And sharing that information in bits and pieces, not to overwhelm teachers, but letting them browse, so to speak, and then letting them take over with the art of teaching and doing it their way remotely.
So when we began implementing,
and one thing that Curt and I have tried in Manassas, which is a small thing, but each of our buildings has an Ellevation ambassador. This is someone who knows the program inside and out and can help teachers troubleshoot. They can sit in PLC meetings and make suggestions on how to search for activities. And then Curt and I meet with our ambassador teams to provide more PD to them so that they can be a big resource to the teachers within their buildings.
Yolanda, did you want to add something?
Yes. So when we started implementation with strategies, as I mentioned, we had a small pilot, but we started first with the district team, and that didn't include my team. It included the secondary instructional specialists who write out the curriculum for math, science, social studies, and language arts. And so the buy-in really came from them, and the implementation really came from them because they were the ones leading those teachers on campuses to ensure that they're implementing it. And so we so we did our district team first, then we did campus leadership teams, and we did a TOT model. And then we integrated a Canvas course where the teachers pulled a lot of the videos that you guys offer in the academy, which are so great. And then we had a follow-up. And so because we had a three-way, kind of like a three-part process to our implementation, that follow-up came from our district specialists, and they met with every PLC team. And so we found that to be the most effective and less overwhelming instead of having a full day PD, was just kind of giving them small nuggets throughout the school year and following up. Actually, my district specialists right now are on campuses. They're going through instructional accommodations, and they're revisiting all of their dashboards as well. So kind of throwing little things so that way they're not so overwhelmed. So that's been the most helpful on our end.
We got a great question in here from Kimberly Peterson. I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts on this. She's asking how you specifically use the data in Ellevation to assess progress monitoring concerns with individual students. So if you could give maybe an example or two of how your district does it, that would be great.
Yeah, I could definitely chime in there. So progress monitoring of not only our direct ESOL service students, but for our monitored kids. So starting with our direct ESOL service students, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we have targets that we try to aim for hit based on composite proficiency level gains. Okay, and they're broken into grade level clusters and they're broken into proficiency levels. We use that data to kind of chart from access to access point, because we're a WIDA consortium state, from access to access testing point, how our students are doing, not only with their composite proficiency level, but then we break that down even further and how they're doing in each one of the domains. So we could see if the student is making, as best we could determine, expected progress towards becoming English proficient, or to be measuring English proficient to move into a monitor phase. We find this incredibly helpful with a lot of our, with our elementary buildings, but also incredibly important when it comes to our middle grades. We have three middle schools altogether. We have two 5-6 schools and one 7-8 school. In those grades, what we find is the phenomenon of the long-term L. And we need to dig into exactly how long have these children been with us? What is their assessment data on language development, but what are also their other assessment indicators telling us over a period of time? And what Ellevation has allowed us to do is to load all of that important data into the platform, from a combination of uploading it manually, uploading it through our tech guys in central office, or uploading it through our SIS, our student information system. And it's incredibly helpful because now you no longer have to have the super magic password for SSWS or for what VDOE allows us to get into for only those who are administrators and have that password. All of our stakeholders can get a hold of that information, and to be able to knowledgeably talk to where the student is by student name and by student need, and to hypothesize what are the next steps that we need to take based on that data snapshot, based on all of that information that we can get. It saves us a tremendous amount of time. We're not guessing because it's all right there for us. Then what we have to do is have those meaningful discussions, right? In those professional learning communities with those other teachers as committees in order to take the next right steps. What this helps us to do is to help to facilitate more equity in our instruction, equity in the sense of increasing the opportunity for inclusive environments in all of our classrooms, and really looking to see, how do I need to help this particular student to be able to graduate within a timely fashion? For our monitor kids, it's the same thing. Why is it all of a sudden that Curt Emmel is now, he's a monitor 6Y2, but he's not doing well? Well, I can immediately grab all of his data and say, well, based on his many years of access data that we have, he made very steady progress. It's only now that we're seeing that he's not making steady progress. So is this an instructional concern? Is this a social and emotional concern? Is this some other concern? It helps us to fine tune what we do in order for us to oversee the instruction of the students that we're responsible for.
I like to note, Kaitlin had typed in the chat the data in Ellevation under that student's profile. You can select either your statewide assessments or whatever data that's in there, and it charts it. And so we couldn't even get some of our vendors with that data to chart it, and now it's at our fingertips. So thanks, Kaitlin, for mentioning that. I also wanted to say that as a district, we've created a dashboard. So every time a teacher logs in, they see their number of ELs, their number of EOs, their number of ELs with IEPs, their number of long terms, their number of RFEPs that are needing to be monitored. I think we still have some work to do, and it's there, but now what do I do with it? The other is a really nice feature in the strategies is, and this got a lot of, it wasn't a feature we were training on, but it came out of training, was teachers go, I see a list of students on the right-hand side when I open up an activity. What's that high, medium support? And what's it based off? So because of those questions, we will now be scheduling a PD, but I think that's where it's making the connection for teachers in regards to data. Once they know what data is it based off of and what support are they needing in regards to this activity.
If I could mention that scale score comparison report again, we've talked a lot about instructional strategies and helping teachers and helping students, but a big part of our office's responsibility is to support building leaders. And so we'll get principals asking us questions and kind of talking about, ESSA accountability and the progress that my students have to make and that kind of thing. And they're the instructional leader in the building, so those are very valid questions. So using that report, we can collaboratively analyze that data and we can identify, for example, long-term English learners, or we can identify students that maybe have gone backwards in their English language proficiency growth. And then we can say, okay, based on this data, what kind of professional learning does your staff need? And then we can develop it specifically to that need. So it helps us create professional learning, but also support that is very specific to the population in the building. We've got 36 elementary schools, 10 high schools, 15 middle schools. It's a large district. So to be able to analyze that data and look at it at the systemic level, and then go to those meetings with those building leaders, it's been really helpful to have that, and then to be able to collaboratively analyze it with them.
In our last couple minutes here, I just want to get to one more question from the chat. Lucy Del Rio asked, is there one specific area or feature of Ellevation, maybe we could even do two, that you would recommend kind of starting with to make that rollout and implementation manageable for teachers? I know Nancy's done a great job of this in Marysville, so I'm not sure if you want to get us started with this one, Nancy.
Well, I did start with the data, and I didn't do strategies till the next year. And if I had to do it over again, I'd have included strategies with the data, because I didn't have as big of a buy-in with the data piece, of course, with my EL teachers, but with those gen ed teachers, they were kind of like, oh, another database. But once I brought strategies in, and I actually did go to every staff meeting, I got on a docket, 30 minutes at every staff meeting at every school to just walk them through strategies, the light bulbs started going off and the usage started to increase. So I completely understand why someone might do data first, which I did it simply for compliance reasons. I mean, that was the reason why I started, but strategies was what's bringing my teachers to that engagement level, so.
I would say with our EL program management, with our task force, EL task force, when we said that, hey, we think we can have this form pre-populated, and that was like, woo! So if I was going to start with EL program management and the teacher piece and completing those forms, it would be that the Ellevation does have the capability to pre-populate the form. So the information's already there. You don't have to go looking for it, go to the CUME file. In regard to strategies, because we just rolled it out this year, I would say two things. Just we had gotten teacher input and they said, hey, with everything going on, don't roll it out until after the Labor Day weekend. So we did, and all we did was say, here's how you sign in. Here's a little bit about it, and browse. That was our very first step.
Yeah, I agree, Alice. It almost depends. My answer to this question would depend on which side of the house you're talking about again. With our EL teachers, we dove right into that workflow piece and said, look, this can help us do notification of placement, assigning and documenting accommodations, generating parent letters. For our teachers on that instructional side, we looked at the data first. And then Nancy, we're kind of in the same space as you. We went right to that student list, which is where a lot of that work happens for us. But now we're working to take it that next step further and connect it to the strategies.
Alice, our story was a lot like yours, actually. When we started, we really wanted them to just look at strategies and look at the data piece of the kids. And so that was important. And our expectations were kind of low. We were like, if you can integrate one Ellevation strategy every 2 weeks, we'll be happy. And of course, they exceeded our expectations, and they tried to integrate it. They would send me videos, principals would send me videos of all the great things that they were doing. But it really, it was an easy sell for them. And then as they started getting their bundle data and their CBA data, benchmarks, all those things, and seeing how their ELs were growing, it was just a given. So it was easy implementation for everybody else. So I think strategies, if for those of you who are watching and are not sure, you can I always recommend, just in our case, it was the best thing. It was a pilot. You can start out and let them sell the product to the other campuses with their wins, with their usage, and with the great things that are happening. So.
Well, thank you all so much, Alex, and thank you for moderating it. That very lively discussion from all of our partners here across the country. I wanted to just, thank everybody for their time today. We are at time for this session, so I want to be respectful of that for everybody on the call. We will be following up with all attendees here with the session recording and other material from the session. I know that there have been some questions about specific material that some of our partners may have built, including particular workflow templates. We'll follow up to see what we can share in a way that obviously protects student information, probably just the templates themselves if we can, and some other resources after the session. But I'd like to just take this opportunity once again to thank Alex, to thank all of our panelists from Turlock, Marysville, New Caney ISD, Frederick, and Manassas City. Thank you so much. I hope everybody, partner or not, found this session beneficial. We hope you have a great rest of your day. And if folks are partners and want to keep this discussion going, we do have a specific Facebook group for our Ellevation partners called Ellevation Educators, where you can interact in a similar format and have discussions about what's working in your district and exchange ideas. So if you go to Facebook and search for the group Ellevation Educators, that is how you will be able to find that group. I know that some folks on this call are in that group as well. Once again, thank you everybody for attending this session. Thank you to our panelists. We hope you have a great rest of your day. And we'll be following up with the materials very shortly.
Great.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.